My name's Mark Wicklund. I'm 48. My wife and I have been together for 20 years. We have 5 children and soon to have our 5th grandson in December. I've been a steel worker, Class A machinist pretty much all my life, along with other numerous jobs along the way. But it's the one I've always felt a kinship to, because you take something raw and you turn it into something that can be used. Congress should be the same way. We have a daughter that's a vet and a son that's a disabled Afghan vet. Spent the last 3 years getting him home and settled in at the house. We've seen the struggles that people face on a daily basis, because we've had the same struggles, whether it's me becoming disabled in 2001 and fighting the system there to get things righted. At that process, I started working on seniors and disability issues with the local senior center and other agencies throughout town to assist those that needed help. My phone's always been on 24 hours a day along with my door, so if somebody needs something, they know how to get a hold of me. It's just the way our family's always been. We've always been involved in the community. Experience-wise, I was on the Macon County Board for short term, where I learned to be fiscally responsible with taxpayers' dollars. Was honored to start the first wind farm in Macon County. See a huge benefit to wind energy in the communities, not only from the cost savings and a new energy resource, but the dollars that come to the communities at the time with the infrastructure changes from roads, bridges, all that money tied to that, and local school districts. To me, wind energy is a win-win, and I was honored to be a part of that, and was honored that they reached out to me to finish the process after I'd left the county board to go and speak on their behalf in wind energy. So I know what troubles those veterans, disabled, seniors, education. Been with Decatur Macon County Opportunities Corporation now going on just over 6 years. I've been president of their board of directors for 5. We have a senior nutrition program. Most people are familiar with Meals on Wheels. In Macon County, they serve roughly between 3,000 to 4,000 people. Our senior nutrition program this year is set to deliver over 60,000 meals to seniors in Macon County. We have 8 community sites, so we try to get the seniors involved and now they're home. So I've seen that increase over the last 7 years from roughly around 30,000, just over 30,000 meals to up close to 70,000 meals a year. So the need's out there, and nothing's being done for it. It's just hard to watch when you know what needs to be fixed and know how government's supposed to work. To watch what's playing out in Washington, D.C. has been hard to watch. We need to get back to government for the people, by the people. And I feel I'm the candidate for that, because I'm actually a candidate of the people and not handpicked or a backroom deal or something like that.
What was the name of the Macon County?
Decatur Macon County Opportunities Corporation. It is the largest and oldest community action agency in Macon County. We're celebrating our 52nd anniversary.
I was going to ask if it was community action. I ran that program in the interim in 1968.
Yeah, we have a just shy of 400 student Head Start.
It's really broadened out into much more than it was in that era.
Yeah, we have a Head Start program, which is a role model in the country. So if they want to try something new, they usually dump it on us first, like the 5-year granting process and issues with that. We're happy to take those on and figure out if they're going to benefit us or hurt us. There's a lot of changes coming to Head Start that we need to look at. We're looking to go to full-day classes. In fact, we have a couple classrooms now that are all-day, and the rest of them are still half-day. But we're in the process of working on a new facility over there and try to move more of our classes to a full-day instead of a half-day. It benefits parents, especially if they're working in that. Falls more in line with the public school system than it does right now. We start earlier and end earlier. So the benefit will be to the parents and the residents of the community by these changes, and also the students that really need a lot of help. at that age, and we see it, on a daily basis.
One question for those who, would be newcomers to Congress. You would be coming in with zero seniority. Given what you know about how Congress operates right now, how would you go about having influence and representing your district if you were elected?
Well, my theory's always been to be vocal, to let people know the issues that are going on and what needs to be addressed. Similar to the sit-in that came off on the floor there by John Lewis, who my wife and I have been blessed to have met and hear his personal story and spend some time with him. These are some actions that can be taken. The push needs to be out in the media and the press to get out what's going wrong and what needs to be fixed, and just to be vocal. And it always makes a difference. We see that in our communities when people come out and they're vocal, you can make a change. And that's the way I feel with Congress. It needs somebody in there to be more vocal. It's not afraid to hide from the tough issues that face our country.
I looked on your website and I noticed you favor gun ownership rights qualified by universal background checks for criminal activity and mental illness. Talk to me a little bit about what you think those universal background checks should be, and do you support blocking those that are on the no-fly list from purchasing guns?
Well, I'll start with that one first. Yes, those that are on the no-fly list or terrorist list should be blocked from purchasing any type of weapon, firearm, explosive, or anything. And that's a list that should last for a while. We've seen that played out in Orlando, where a young man was on the list, somehow managed to get off the list, and within that time period was able to purchase weapons. Until they have proven themselves in a way that, that they're not a threat to the community, they should be banned from purchasing those type of firearms. As far as gun laws, with the military history of my family and the hunting and fishing we've done in this district, I support the right to own and bear guns. Limiting what's going on with the weapons and stuff like that doesn't really benefit. It's just more laws that we can't enforce. The ones we have on the book, we really need to enforce, and background checks are a great way of doing that. Collecting that information for data and personal use should never be allowed, and that takes away from the privacy part of it. But we do need stronger background checks, and we need to close these loopholes that are in these big gun shows. You can leave here, go to Indiana, walk into a large gun show, and come out there with whatever you want. We need to look at changing the loopholes in these big gun shows.
Anything else you can think of that
Well,
they need to be doing a little more?
Yeah, and I've done a big push, and the last 16 months and prior to that, I've always been a big advocate for mental health. I've seen the need for it. My sister-in-law, who suffered from a severe paranoid schizophrenic breakdown over 10 years ago, and the lack of help and resources that were there available for her. They're big on pushing pharmacy. And all research and that shows that we need to look at reducing pharmacy use and go to a more psychological work environment. She's since moved down to Staunton, Illinois, where they have a great behavioral health center down there that focuses on the person. They've worked with her, they've reduced some of her meds, they've worked on job interview skills and stuff like that, and she's actually back in the workforce now, and I'm very proud of where she's at right now, and she's back to providing a resource in the community. Also on the gun issue is a big personal issue to me is parents and safety for children. As our children got older, our guns got locks, they got put in cases. There was multiple steps for them to being able to access them, and we have a lot of parents that fail to meet that.
Could you talk, moving on to a different issue, could you talk about your stance on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and why you've come to the conclusions you have?
Well, with a lot of these trade agreements, in fact, I was just going over some of this before I headed this way today. We need trade agreements that are going to benefit the farming and the agriculture issue. But tied in with a lot of these trade agreements that we're passing is language that hurts middle class, allows businesses to vacate the United States and move overseas for lower wages. Trade agreements should be a means to increase other countries' level of income, health care, safety. It shouldn't be just for promotion of jobs and tax safe havens and credits. Agriculture does need help. That's why I kind of confused on why it's taken us so long to finish some deals with Cuba down there and start looking to them for more agriculture outreach, which would greatly benefit the 13th District with ADM and their intermobile. The Mississippi River over here, is just a huge increase, and it's like the government has a bad habit of taking too long to address many issues. And we also need to change the International Trade Commission and how they take on these cases. It shouldn't take 2 to 3 years for them to take up a case. This plays out with U.S. Steel down south. It took them over 2 years to hear that case. By that time, the market was flooded with cheap steel and aluminum and that, and trying to rescind some of that now is going to take time. But in the meantime, we have thousands of employees that are laid off and without jobs and looking for new jobs.
In your opening statement, you mentioned that in one role you found out how to be fiscally conservative with your constituents' dollars. Can you give us some examples of how you did that?
Well, we close, and this should be government's role no matter what agency you're in. You should look to cut cost. There's a lot of wasted spending in government. I think we all see that. We work to rein in large communication bills that we were getting, phone bills, internet fees and stuff like that. And we worked hard to renegotiate those contracts year after year to get the price down. I still think it needs to go further, just some of the costs associated with phone call. Postage, which used to be huge for governments because of all the mailings and stuff they've had to do with electronic communication, faxes and stuff like that, greatly reduced our cost on postage. We need to look at those. We need to continue to rein in health care costs. We've tried the Affordable Care Act was a good start, but it just needs to go further. We actually, one of the last bills I signed was honor voting on was reducing the tax base by $1 million. We'd managed to rein in enough spending over a 3-year period to be able to give some back to the taxpayers. I wish they'd have kept the process rolling after I left there, because now they're in a financial mess with trying to appease taxpayers by continuing to reduce taxes 2 more years following instead of letting it roll and see how things laid out a couple of years or a year down the road, which has in turn put them into a problem over there in Macon County that they're trying to get out of right now. I'm hoping they do. It looks optimistic. We increased fees, and this has been one of the robocalls on me is would it change your mind if you knew he increased fees and taxes? Well, I did not increase taxes. Fees we have increased, and my reasoning on that is if you're an offender, a DUI, domestic violence, those programs, and you've been court mandated to take certain classes and stuff like that, it should be the responsibility of the offender to pay for those services and not the taxpayers. So we did increase fees on those services there to bring them in line so that taxpayers weren't covering the cost of that. And some of this we've done within DMCOC too, which is Decatur Macon County Opportunities Corporation. We've reduced some of our fees in that there, although we're a little different than most because the gold standard for community action agencies like that is to reinvest 74% of their dollars into their services. The majority of our services, we reinvest 94% of our dollars into those services. So it puts us way up and above. But we have a dedicated staff that knows why they're there. They're there to help the communities, and we try to help them out.
You just alluded there to the Affordable Care Act, and if I caught you right, you said it was a good start but needed to go further. What kinds of changes would you?
Well, we need to get back to looking to a universal or a public option on that. This last 16 months, traveling the 14th District, the heavy burden of the Affordable Care Act has fallen on the middle class and those with individual and small businesses. They've seen increases, and not-for-profit community agencies see the same thing. We've seen 19% increases in our health care premiums this year alone. At that rate, small businesses, family-owned businesses, independent truck drivers, they can't afford to keep up at that rate, and something needs to be changed.
So there are a lot of different issues that kind of ping-pong around Congress. One of them has kind of continued for the last decade or so. That's Guantanamo Bay. Any thoughts about that?
A lot of thoughts
Yeah.
on that. There's been a big push to close Guantanamo Bay or Gitmo or whatever you want to call it. I personally don't see the benefits to closing that. You open yourself up into other issues with housing dangerous terrorists inside the U.S. borders. Is our Department of Justice and that prepared to take that on? I don't see that. Being involved with county government and overseeing, I was a chairman of the Justice Committee, and housing and housing other inmates has always been a high issue. So how do we weigh putting them in the same locked up system that we use for normal criminals? Just doesn't line up. Does it need some changes, some modifications of what goes on down there? Yes. Can I say firsthand what those changes need to be? No, without looking at them and going through them. Honestly, I can't answer that question. There's just so much down there at Gitmo that it's hard to fathom, but it does need some changes.
And I guess in a kind of backwards way, that leads us to terrorism. And what would you see the country doing differently relative to terrorism and the threat that it poses?
Well, we need to be more proactive than what we have, especially on the internet side, the social media side, to start with. And we also need to look at the visas that come in here. I know there's a big push for a wall down on the Mexico border. Majority of our terrorists, in fact, a large majority, don't come across that southern border. They come in through visa programs, whether it's work, school, marriage, somewhere along that line. We need to look at coming to a program that works best for the security of us. Playing out with the gentleman, Lord forbid another, attack out there on the East Coast. They could track his trips to and from Afghanistan, in and out of Pakistan. Trips like that should automatically kick up a red flag. And why it didn't, I don't know. He was also looking to push for a visa for his wife, who's pregnant from Pakistan. She has since left the country. We need to look at whether we increase our computer means to automatically red flag certain travel trips or something like that, needs to be done. The investment needs to be in tighter internet and computer services. Those are issues without affecting those that wish to come to this country for schooling and for job training and those type of programs. It needs to be done without harming those that really want to come here and learn and work and be a vital part of our communities. And we have a lot of those in this country, far more than we do terrorists. And most of the terrorist attacks have actually been perpetrated by domestic terrorists, whether they claim Islam or another. The majority of them have been domestic outside the 9/11 attacks.
So where would you strike a balance, when you talk about domestic terrorism? What should be the government's role in terms of what kinds of surveillance, what kinds of internal investigative activities are appropriate?
Well, I think they have the investigating part down, and we see that by some of the actions that have come up. It's the follow-through, the follow-up, staying on top of these individuals or groups that have been in this country far before September 11th that we've monitored forever. We need to do that. It's like the pressure cooker, these devices, these, the chemicals they're using. How you're going to monitor a pressure cooker nowadays, I don't know. Not too many people use them anymore. To me, it's still the best way to make ham and beans, but, it's something that can readily be picked up in a thrift store or a yard sale or something like that. But what goes in them can't when it comes to chemicals and explosions. And, on the East Coast right there, whatever was used inside of those should have hit a red flag for that area. Okay, why is an individual purchasing these when they're in New Jersey or out on Manhattan when there's no viable need for what they're purchasing? Should automatically kick a red flag in there.
And then with the broad, how would you rate the current administration on its handling of efforts to deal with ISIS and terrorism, and what course do you feel the country should be taking with it?
Well, I think we're doing a fairly great job with handling terrorism. With the circumstances, we look at Syria and what's going on over there. Trying to take on ISIS while Russia is trying to change the view of Syria and its government, makes it kind of hard. It's just a balancing act in there. This was, ISIS was kind of created from the aftermath of the Iraq War. We should have had more check and balances at that time to deal with that issue. There was warnings of this possibly happening before we withdrew from there, and I think we should have been more on top of that circumstances there in Iraq when we vacated there. Although we still have some troops on the ground in Iraq. But these, honestly, I'd love to see these events stopped 100%. The reality is that's next to impossible. Can we reduce them? Can we make people more aware of what's going on around them? Step up and talk about what's going on in their communities and that. The Chelsea area there in Manhattan where these devices were dropped is a highly public area. There's a lot of people in there. We just need to be more aware of what's going on. It's just like your home. When you protect it, you're aware of what's going on around it, and the same needs to be done in our neighborhoods and our communities.
So, over the last, couple of decades, Decatur's really struggled. Caterpillar and, some of the other grain things, that's just ADM lost a lot of jobs and things. What kind of lesson do you carry from your work there to Washington?
Well, and Decatur being my hometown, and outside of not being born there, I've lived there all my life. So I've watched the battles in Decatur at ADM from the early 70s, with the attacks on labor and the working class, and breaking up the unions, from 1 to 2 into 5 different groups. I lived right down the road from all that. I've seen the guard shacks on fire. I've seen, the riots and that. It tends to have about a 2-decade cycle, and I can say that after watching what's going on the last 3 decades since then. But that being said, from my time on the county board and working in the community with Tate and Lyle, I still call it Staley's. To me, that's what I'll always remember from the tower was always the scenic view from my backyard. So, but with what's gone on there and Caterpillar, Firestone leaving, Firestone, its intent was to destroy the union, and they succeeded in that by vacating Decatur. That was their big issue, was what are we going to do about this? And on the county board, working with ADM and bringing up their safety, their security records, increasing the intermobile, working with their energy over there. ADM has improved their safety record greatly, and we need to continue to see that. But the primary issue, and what's played out this year, and this is where the two, because you got the 74, 93, 94 with Tate and Lyle Cat, and those being locked out, and then we get into 14, 16 with Clifford Jacobs and Champaign-Urbana, Mueller Company in Decatur negotiating contract, and that the issue lies with if we address the insurance issue, which continues to plague us, and always seems to be the volatile issue in negotiating new contracts, whether it's public contracts or private union contracts. Insurance always plays a big role on that, and until we can address the insurance issue and remove it from contract negotiations, that continues to plague the overall bottom dollar of the companies, to where they can get back to giving better pay increases, better vacations, sick leave, and issues like that. Until we can truly address the insurance issue, I think that right there is what's truly holding back manufacturing, not only in Decatur, but throughout the 13th District in the country.
So that your work then would really focus on amendments or changes to the Affordable Care Act in order to take.
Yeah, that would be a big starting part right there. If you can address the issue and insurance issue, which is not only the manufacturing side, but it's also Social Security, Medicare side. It's insurance is the key player in a lot of these veterans issues, in that. So the insurance issue affects everybody, and then we start looking at these trade deals that have siphoned manufacturing and production out of the country and moved it overseas, and renegotiating those to where it's not negatively affecting us, and changing that around and bringing industry back to this country, which is the leader when it comes to industry and manufacturing. That's our role, and solar energy is one of those, created here in America, but we're last in production manufacturing of not only the devices, but the source, the energy source.
Right.
What are some of the most pressing transportation and waterway issues in your district?
Waterway issues, is a big one. We live right next to water there on Lake Decatur, so I've always been environmentally conscious. But that affects agriculture in this region big time, trying to clean up the nitrates and that are going into the river, and then creating a dead zone down in the Gulf of Mexico. The EPA and FDA, they've all implemented programs that agriculture needs to follow to do this without guidance and without the funding that's needed to do this. Is up there, but it's something that needs to be addressed. We see the dead zone, the Gulf. We know what's creating it. We just need to get to a solution to help fix that and start reversing it before it gets out of hand. As far as I'm concerned, it's already out of hand, but we need to bring it back in. And that's, the agriculture in this area is huge. And the small farmers, although we're seeing fewer and fewer of them, just like the rest of us, the middle class, they're picking up the burden for big farms that are hiding their funds, hiding their monies overseas. And, we need to continue to take care of the small farmers in this community and independent farmers.
But the inland ports made a big difference over there, right? Is that,
It's,
have you seen the effects of that, or?
Well, I'm seeing, see, I've been off the Macon County Board for 3 years. I would like to see that project further along than where it is. And it's held up basically by state and federal funding and that to help with that. If we can get that done and get the funding, it's not all public funding. It's a mix of public and private. There's $1 billion gateway over there, huge multi-year thing. I'd like to see the passage of that, and I'd like to tie fundings into that to finish the 51 project now that's on its 30-some year of being produced and still no further than really assumption. So with those projects there would greatly increase. It would also reduce what's going on the riverfront over there also to help with that. But it needs to be finished, and it's just the lack of Congress and the state doing their jobs is holding up so much.
So could you explain a little more about the inland port and how it might have an impact not only on Decatur, Macon County, but also central part of the state?
Well, like Decatur's always been vital to the central part of the state, Taylorville, Pana, the rural communities like that, whether it's industry, agriculture, or that. The $1 billion Gateway project would build a loop around the east side of Decatur. It would allow better truck access, farm access to and from ADM without bringing them down into the city, where a lot of the smaller communities are hurting by big trucks and that come through and tear up their roads. It would give them an alternate route and an easier and more convenient route for them to get in. ADM is also, I was glad to be part of that project and getting it off the ground. This is just one of those to see jobs. You're talking thousands of jobs with this program once it's done and up and running with the new rail yards that are coming in over there at ADM, trucking, jobs associated with that, along with labor jobs, road construction, and manufacturing. The benefit to the whole central area would be great. It would help the smaller rural communities like Pana start seeing an increase of residents instead of a decrease in residents. And whenever you can increase residents in these smaller communities, it increases their tax bases and allows them, their schools to grow, their roads to grow, and stuff like that. But I'd love to see that project get finalized and get onto the meat and bones of the project. It also helped Richland Community College over there with some of their agriculture and projects that they have there at Richland, because all that's right out there on the same end of town, and they work hand in hand with each other.
Can you tell us your reasons for supporting the increase of the minimum wage to $15 per hour?
Well, everything keeps going up. Cost of gas, cost of insurance, cost of car insurance, cost of rent, cost of groceries keeps going up. The only thing that hasn't been going up is the minimum wage. It needs to go up. There's no questions about that, and getting to it. And how do we do that without affecting small businesses, family businesses, like your small local stores downtown and that are having problems getting employees? And if they're forced to a higher minimum wage, are they actually going to hire another employee? Probably not. So we need to look at ways to protect the smaller individual businesses to offset some of that cost. And I have a little bit of plan of that on my website. We create these summer jobs. They're 2 to 3 months long with the goals of younger people having jobs after the 3-month period. Reality is that doesn't work out. They get a job for 3 months, then they're off again. So I think to offset some of the summer job money that we're throwing in there, which should be geared towards college students and high school students, to helping smaller businesses with a wage increase that would help them turn around and hire another employee or two employees, as opposed to not hiring anybody. I just see a win in that direction with the smaller businesses that are suffering.
On, back to transportation for a minute, a lot of talk lately about the gas tax and whether that's the proper mechanism for long-term funding for infrastructure improvements. What are your feelings on that issue?
Well, I think, as we all know, Decatur just implemented another 5-cent gas tax over there. So you see it when you drive through town and you pop out into the smaller suburbs. You can see a huge difference in the taxes there. The state, the federal, the cities, the townships, they all start looking to increase, their gas tax somehow. The only people hurting is the communities. Because everybody wants to throw in their 2 cent, 5 cent, 25% taxes, no matter what it is, on the fuel charge, which is kind of why we pay higher fuel costs, especially in Decatur and Macon County. Is that the answer? No, it's not the answer. We need a strong infrastructure bill here that we haven't seen for a long time, and a jobs bill that's going to put money into roads, bridges, water, plumbing, sewer, that all needs updated, hasn't been updated in some communities 70 years to 100 years. Decatur's in the process right now, have been in the process of tube sleeving old wood beam sewer system to bring it into line. That'd tell you how outdated some of the infrastructure is. And in return with that, with the strong jobs bill and infrastructure bill, the return on the dollar is where the benefits come in that. Some throw around, anywhere from $17 to $200 and some return on every dollar invested. I like to refer to the $17 per dollar. It just makes more sense than trying to explain to somebody, how do you get $220 return on $1? But we've seen these programs work and work strong and continue to work over the years. We've dumped so much on the smaller communities to take on these projects without funding, and that's why we see the higher taxes on gas and other utilities within communities.
So the infrastructure bill that Congress recently passed, do you feel doesn't go far enough? Is that what you're saying?
If you're referring to the same amount of money that they passed a couple years prior, no. That doesn't even come close to taking on what needs to be done in this country. Prime example is Flint and the problem they've had. Chatham has issues. Galesburg has issues, with the water and that right there. So the bill they passed is not enough to take care of what needs to be done. And taxpayers don't mind paying more as long as they know they're getting their investment in what they're paying.
Could you talk a bit about who you're supporting for president this election and why?
I am although I was a Sanders supporter in the beginning, one of the few that was vocally out there supporting him, and ran the GOTV for Bernie and Macon County. Took kind of a beating on that, but it was something that needed to be done, and I still stand behind Bernie. He had a lot of great goals and stuff that he wanted to get out there and get done. The reality of most of them probably would have took us quite a while to get to those achievements, but it was a good starting point with him getting out there and pushing these issues and continue to push them. But since then, I've aligned myself with Hillary Clinton for president. She has a fairly long record of public service, and although I wasn't too happy with her and Tipper Gore, back in the early days, trying to limit what music I listened to as a teenager, but I was a teenager at that time, so having teenagers, I understand some of what they were talking about at that time, but Yep, there's just a huge difference between Hillary and Donald Trump. You see it every day playing out. Which direction do we want our country to go in? Do we want it to go in a positive direction that benefits everybody, or do we want it to go in an opposite direction, take us back 20, 30 years on where we were at? It's just the tone of his campaign and what it's created worries me greatly, and I don't think I've ever worried about a presidential election as much as I have now. I was my first goal, although I've always followed what's gone on as a young kid, was Jimmy Carter and watching what he did and what the criticism and stuff he took by trying to do the right thing, and just watching what's going on. There's reminiscence of Wallace and that, and I pray every day that come November, we're going to be solid, we're going to be behind each other and not fighting with our neighbors.
On the issue of education, what should be the federal government's role in education?
Education. Well, overseeing a Head Start program, I kind of have an idea that, they implement everything and want everything done, but they don't increase the funding that's needed for teachers and that to be able to perform what's going on. We set test standards and expect everybody to follow the same test. Well, we all know that not everybody tests the same and not everybody learns the same way. I think standardized testing should be a good starting point at the beginning on where a student's at and where they need to go, and not on a standard that benefits a teacher or benefits a school by funding because they push up their test scores. I think we all know how test scores can be manipulated, and I don't want to see standardized school testing manipulated to benefit a school or that. It should be used to benefit the student and get them the help they needed in learning in that. IEP for those with disabilities, those testing need to be done. Parents should not have to argue with a school district on getting their student tested at a young age for dyslexia or learning disabilities. Personally went through that with our children. Teachers he needs to be tested. His math scores are out of this world, but his English is off. That's usually a sign of somebody with dyslexia. And if caught early enough, it can be used as a great education for the student to overcome that disability and be productive.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. We're actually right at hitting time here, so is there anything final you'd like to say to wrap things up?
I didn't feel like 45 minutes. But, it's been a great opportunity the last 16 months, and basically, my life working in the community and being involved, whether it's volunteering or helping out in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And living in Central Illinois has always been a pleasure of mine, even though it takes a lot of abuse from the media on sometimes, and especially Decatur, with what goes on over there, and it is a great community. Springfield's a great community. The smaller Collinsville, they're all beautiful communities. And we need to remember that they're a part of us and continue to be a part of us. My wife, being from Chicago, thought downstate was flat and full of cornfields and bean fields. To her shock, it's not. It has a lot of great, beautiful communities and wonderful people in it. And, she was amazed at the diversity of some of these smaller communities. And I remind her that the diversity of those smaller communities is what helped build Illinois, and that's why they've stayed diverse as they are, and why families still continue to live in those, and why myself and our family continues to live here in Central Illinois in the 13th District. And I just want to continue to see it grow and be the community that I love and respect. And I appreciate your guys' time.